Okay, good morning. Good morning. Garrett here again. It's about 6 a.m. We did get up at the right time finally, 5 a.m., so not too far off at 6. Usually I end up starting to work around 6 o'clock after getting up and taking the dogs out and all that stuff. I find that in the mornings, it's a great time for me to be able to get in a really solid working session because one, not many people are up this early. Two, the dogs are still they're active, they're awake, but they're really content with going back to sleep and there's nothing wrong and they'll leave me alone. And I don't know, I think when I first wake up, I'm the most refreshed and I'm the most, clear-headed and able to get a good working session in. So I'll get in a good working session probably around, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 hours probably working session. So I'll be able to get quite a bit done. Today we got a lot going on today, so gonna take what I learned from the past few events, right, that I've been helping out with, and gonna go and implement all of those things. So that includes I've been doing things manually, so I've been entering a lot of data in just directly through my database by writing the actual raw queries. I want to get away from that 100%. One, it's not very efficient. Two, it opens the door to making mistakes, which I've made plenty of doing that. And so I'm gonna try and eliminate that altogether. I also want to be able to completely manage the stuff from the database, but through my front end. So I want to be able to see it, which I've already actually implemented yesterday. I want to be able to edit it, which I'm going to be working on today. I want to be able to add stuff. I'm going to be working on that today as well. I want to make like the core value of what I'm doing. I want to make that doable through the UI. So the core value of what I'm doing is that I help people in groups connect with one another. And I know that's more specific than what I've been, but still very generalized and vague, and I'm going to keep it that way. But I help the members in groups connect with one another better than how they would already be doing it. And so, again, I've been doing that manually by just querying the database myself to find who should be connecting with who, and I want to eliminate that. I want to actually have something that can work just through the front end, that I can hit a button and just see, hey, this person should be connected to this person. And it'll run some algorithm that I build. I have to build that algorithm based on the manual experience that I've had for the past few times and what I've learned. And it'll make it a lot easier for me because I spend quite a bit of time doing that every time there's an event. And I want to eliminate that. And then the other thing that I have to do is I need to make a change to my data model. It won't be a hard change to make. I don't know how steady I'm being. It's kind of hard to be in this position, but I don't know how. It won't be a very significant change. It's not going to change any of the data. Well, it's going to change the data. It's not going to. There will be no dependencies upon this. It will make querying for things and finding stuff easier. I do want to talk about databases today. I think that's what I'm going to talk about, is using the correct database and how do you know what the correct database is. I think that's what we're going to talk about today. But as always, I need to get some work done first. Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so it's about 12 p.m., so the morning's over, and we had a pretty good working session. It was about 4 hours earlier today. I got two of the things that I wanted to get done, and I'll tackle the other two things in the afternoon. I can actually maybe talk about what they are in a little bit, but right now I'm gonna have lunch. One of the things that I think people don't really talk about the lighting's better this way. I think one of the things that people don't really talk about when it comes to entrepreneurship is nutrition. You're trying to maximize every minute of the day so that you can get stuff done. So you might not have the most amount of time to make food. But I think it's something that's really, really important, because if you eat crap, you'll feel like crap. And it's really important that you don't, that you feel, clear-headed and that you feel energized as much as possible. So this is actually kind of a big lunch, and it's not necessarily the healthiest lunch. But it's what I had, and it didn't take me a lot of time. And I think it's relatively healthy. It's nachos, which maybe is seen as an unhealthy thing, but it's, I think the chips that I got are actually like kind of healthy chips or something like that. And then vegetarian, like beef crumbles, so not real meat, just some cheese and some salsa, and then some avocados and all that stuff. Generally speaking, I think the cheese is probably the least healthiest thing, but pretty healthy all around. So I'm gonna have lunch, and then we'll get back to work, and I'll talk about what I did and what I have to do coming up in the afternoon, and then I guess we'll do like a check-in later on tonight and see how it went. So, all right. So we mentioned earlier on that we want to talk about databases in this video at some point, and that's going to be now. So what I want to do is I want to discuss why you might pick one database over another, and really, I guess the ultimate question is which one should you choose, because there are a lot out there. This is like a huge question. Which database should I use? I even myself spend time thinking about this question sometimes. And I recently got a question from somebody in one of my last videos. Let me see if I can find that. Hold on. The question: what do you think of headless WordPress as a data source with Next.js front end, and for mobile, just React Native to query the API from the WordPress data source? What problems will I run into? I've never done that before. So in that specific case, I really don't know what problems you're going to run into. That's kind of hard to say. But generally speaking, WordPress is going to have control of your data in that case. And WordPress will allow you to edit data. It will allow you to add data. It will allow you to read data in the way that it allows you to do so. Now, you might be able to find a plugin or perhaps build a custom plugin that allows you to enter the data no matter how you want. But ultimately, you are going to be bound by whatever limitations and constraints WordPress has. The other thing as well is that, let's say whatever product you're building becomes revolutionary or it becomes really popular and a lot of people want to use it. You then have to worry about scaling up your WordPress instance, which is not going to work in the way that maybe scaling up a more modern application that you build from scratch is going to. So, for example, services like AWS and GCP and Azure and amongst others that provide, database hosting services, a lot of times they will provide ways to deal with this horizontal scaling or vertical scaling, but you won't be able to take advantage of any of the features that they provide because you're using WordPress, and you'll be, again, constrained to whatever WordPress does. Additionally, let's say that you want to represent or capture certain types of data, like temporal data or geospatial data. I don't know that WordPress can't do that, but I also don't know that WordPress is very good at doing that if it can. If it can, it might have been a plugin that someone created just to check off a box and say that it can do something, but it might not be the best choice. Now, granted, also, actually, this is worth noting too, that if you eventually outgrow your headless WordPress, setup and you want to switch somewhere else, you'll then have to figure out how to export all of the data out of WordPress, how to conceptualize it, how to make sense of it given, the data model that WordPress has created. It's not that you can't do that. It's just, I don't know that that's going to be the best bet, especially since you mentioned that you know how to use Next.js and React Native. Why not just build the backend too? So that's one instance. But getting back to this overall question of which database should you use, I think, again, it comes down to two things in this case. Number one, what do you already know how to use? So for me, as an example, I know how to use a number of different databases. I've used MongoDB in the past. I've used Postgres a lot, actually. Like SQL databases are probably the database that I have the most professional experience with. But in trying to build my app, the database that I have the most experience with is going to be Firestore, which is a product, part of the Firebase suite, which is a product from Google, from GCP, Google Cloud Platform. I've also used other stuff like Neo4j, and at one point I used Redis very briefly. But these are more like use case specific databases. They're not, at least the last two, are you kind of use case specific. They're not really something that you would just use for anything and everything in the same way that you might use Postgres for anything and everything. Ultimately, for me, I chose to use Firestore for two reasons. Number one, I feel very comfortable with Firestore. I know how to use it pretty well, and I know, let's say, I would probably say that when it comes to Firestore, I already know how to work with it, that in a way, or I already know how to work with it well enough to be able to cover 80 or 90% of my use cases. Certain things might come up and I have to look something up, like maybe I want to do some custom indexing, or maybe I want to do geospatial data or temporal data or something, and those are like a little bit more specific. I haven't had any problems with that yet, but that might be a little bit more specific than just your string or an integer or something like that. So that's one reason that I chose Firestore. The other reason, and this is more of like an engineering purist view versus be a startup founder and get stuff done. So, and this I was kind of talking about, I think in one of my previous videos, is a lot of just like purist engineers will say, well, no, you should be using Postgres or SQL because that is like the fastest, and you get to benefit from the schema that you can create, and there's nothing that Postgres can't do, and largely it's true. Like Postgres is an extremely capable and really, really amazing database, and I think in time, I might make a decision to move to that. But there's something that's really important to that needs to be considered. When you're a startup founder, you need the ability to like bend but not break, if that makes sense. I think that's probably how I would phrase it. What I mean by that is when you start out building whatever it is that you're building, your data model will probably look very different than it will on day 10 or day 20 or day 100 or day 365, so 1 year later. And the reason is because you're going to learn a lot. At least you should be learning a lot. You will learn a lot by talking to people. You will learn a lot by experimenting. You will learn a lot by trying to release your app into production and then learning what does and doesn't work, and what data you need but don't have, and what data you have but don't need. And you will want to make updates to your data model. And when you have the strictness of a relational database, you have to deal with migrations. And if you feel comfortable, if you're very comfortable and you're not afraid of that already, and you can do that very quickly, then by all means, use Postgres, use a SQL database, go for it, right? I'm not going to advise you not to do that if you feel very comfortable doing it. But in my experience, a lot of developers really don't feel that comfortable with the database. And even more than that, I think as a startup founder, your job is building a product that people love, not building tooling or processes or worrying about schema migrations. And so with that, I think it makes sense to use a NoSQL database such as Firestore or DynamoDB or MongoDB, because they're going to be able to provide you with 90%, maybe even more than 90% of what you need given your use case. If you have an extremely specific use case, then you should go for an extremely specific database. Like if you're working with time series data, then you probably don't want to use Mongo. Like maybe you don't even want to use Postgres. Maybe you want to look at something more specific like InfluxDB or something like that. But most use cases are not that. Most use cases can be accomplished by a more general purpose database. And my point in bringing all this up is that it would make sense as a startup founder to use a database that will provide you with the ability to be as flexible as possible so that you can make changes on the fly as you learn about things. You will always need to worry about what data is there such that the front of your app, the front end, the thing that people use, doesn't break. You're never going to get away from needing to do that. But if you have a relational database, in my opinion, you add on the migration aspect of it, and that becomes an extra step at best, and at worst, it becomes a huge headache when you have lots of data that you have to worry about, or more complex schemas that you have to worry about. And so that's why I would suggest using something like Firestore or MongoDB or DynamoDB. So these are 3 different databases. One, MongoDB, is open source and you will not be locked into any cloud provider. If you're using Firebase, which I am, I would recommend going with Firestore. It's a great database. If you're using AWS, I would recommend taking a look at DynamoDB. These are all great options, and I think they're great starting points to just kind of, at the very least, build an MVP. Plenty of companies use these databases in production with thousands, if not millions, of users. So you're not going to be, um, like you're not going to be reinventing the wheel, or swimming where no one has swam before by trying to use these databases to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I say go for it. Yeah, I think that was coherent, and I think that made sense. Oh, actually, I'll add one more thing. Like that might seem like it's not scalable. I've heard engineers say, "Oh, well, doing that won't be scalable." Fine, maybe, but I will say, and I think this is worth noting, that if you've ever heard of Y Combinator, they make great YouTube videos on startups, helping startups. A lot of successful people over there. I think it was started by successful entrepreneurs, founders. Um, One of the things that they frequently say is do things that don't scale. And the reason that they say that is because doing something that scales often requires that you build a lot of stuff that will take you away from the mission or the actual goal of learning about your users and finding product market fit. If you build an entire platform that can accommodate millions of users, but you don't even have one user, that's not good. You've done it wrong. So to choose a database and go at it with an approach of like, well, what is this going to work? How is this going to work when I have 1,000 users, 10,000 users, 100,000 users maybe, when you don't even have one user yet? I think is not the right way to go about it. Go about it in a way that allows you to be as flexible as possible and allows you to iterate as quickly as possible as you're learning about your customer and as you're trying to find product market fit. That's the most important thing. Let me see how many minutes I got here. Okay, so this was a almost 2 hour working session since I recorded the last part of the video when I was talking about databases. Pretty good. Actually got everything that I wanted to do today done with the exception of one thing, which is a much, much larger conversation. Well, a conversation with myself since I'm the only person working on this. But essentially, I want to make a change to the data model. And I want to make that change because it'll help me with my algorithm that I want to build, that I've kind of been building manually, that I want to put into code and make happen automatically. So the only thing that I'm really going to be doing now is I'm going to be starting to do some reading for the rest of the day, and I think I'll leave the portion of like figuring out the algorithm. I think I'll leave that until tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to reading this book. I think that's backwards. I mentioned this either in yesterday's video or in today's video, but it's called, actually I think it was today's video. It's called Play to Win, and it's a book about business strategy. I've only read 21 pages, so I can't really give a review just yet, but it was recommended to me by someone who I have a lot of respect for, so I expect that I will enjoy the book. So far, 21 pages in, it's been pretty good. The other thing that I'm going to do as far as reading goes, I probably want to have like 2 books at once at all times, for 2 reasons. One, I'm a bit ADHD, so I like to kind of go back and forth between topics that both stimulate and interest me. I don't know, I just kind of enjoy that better. But the other book also, like, it kind of leaves the room for more technical books when I need to learn something technical. And so right now, learning about AI, but more specifically at the moment, I have a use case for a recommendation engine. And so I'm going to be reading a book on that. I had already actually started reading the book. I think I'm anywhere from like 20 to 40% done the book. Maybe more like 20%. I don't remember exactly, but I had kind of put it off to the side for a little bit, and I think I'm going to go and get back into that book now because that's my use case right now, is a recommendation engine. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing probably for the rest of the day. I'm going to have dinner with the family and then read those books. So no reason to really record any of that. But it was a pretty productive day. About 6 hours worth of working time. I'd really like to get that up to like 12 hours, but it's pretty idealistic. I mean, well, a big reason that didn't happen is that I forgot to press the start button on the timer earlier in the day. so I kind of missed out on recording a lot of it. And I don't know, maybe it took a longer lunch than usual. I mean, it is a Saturday, so it's pretty typical that I would do that. And then during the week, I'll stick to like an hour lunch or something like that. So that's gonna be that for this vlog. Hopefully you enjoyed. If the audio wasn't good, I don't think it was. I think I had some problems with my first microphone, and still I kind of switched to a couple of other ones, and then I found this like audio recorder that I had in my bag, and it turns out that like the battery kind of exploded from not being, I guess, from not being used. I don't really know how that works, but that was a bit unfortunate. Um, but yeah. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully this was interesting. If you did like it, please subscribe and like and comment and all that stuff. Yeah, I'll see you in a couple days for the next video.